It takes a positive man, one with a positive image, someone who will.
I want to welcome you to the event today. We're celebrating a historic moment 40 years ago when Mayor Walter Washington announced the creation of the Narcotics Treatment Administration in the city government. It's not just that we're celebrating that. We want to get a chance to have many of the people who played central roles in that be able to speak themselves, and have all of you, because everybody here is a VIP and an expert, and I want to hear from everybody. We have some people listed on the program, but there's going to be lots of time for everybody to speak. The first one, I'm going to ask Ron Clark to come up. Ron created the program called RAP Incorporated in Washington the same year that NTA started. Unlike NTA, which was gone in 3 years, RAP is here and bigger and better than ever, thanks to Ron and his staff and what they have done in the therapeutic community era. And so Ron has seen the 40 years of experience in the District of Columbia. And I told him that he was one of the top VIPs here to me. I am just very proud that he's here. And I want to hear anything you have to say about anything you've heard or anything else you want to give to us.
Well, thank you, Dr. DuPont, and congratulations on 40 years. This is unexpected. I see a lot of familiar faces here, and I guess those of you who may remember, Regional Addiction Prevention RAP was on a different track than NTA, which started in 1970. Ron Grenier, who you mentioned, and I partnered up. I had been a part of Synanon and the development of Synanon, and I'd come east to work with Mitch Rosenthal and setting up Phoenix House. I left Phoenix House and went to work for Benny Prim and Bedford-Stuyvesant. Bedford-Stuyvesant is an education within itself. It prepared me for coming to Washington, D.C. I got a call one day from a friend of mine, and he said he had been talking with two former priests who had left the priesthood because they felt that the church has not been involved in the community on the level that they thought it should, and they would do better if they were just community organizers, interesting word, and doing some things on their own. And they wanted to do something around drug addiction. So they wanted to know would I come to Washington, D.C. to see if I could help them to start what turned out to be the first TC in Washington. There's a dispute between Second Genesis and RAP about who was first. But anyway, I said that I would come down, and I came down one weekend, and I never left. My background is TC. And of course, coming out of Synanon in those days, and we had done some remarkable things. I was there for 8 years, which is a long time, interesting time in terms of how people spend time in treatment. And I'd gone from being a kicking addict on a couch in those days, cold turkey, to a director in terms of acquisition, which Synanon is famous for. It got everything it needed without putting out any money. And so when I got the call to come to New York from Mitch Rosenthal, of course, a few of us that went, we thought we were going to change New York. We knew everything. There was nothing that we didn't know or we couldn't do, and of course the answer was residential, and it was a TC. So I hit New York much the way I hit Washington, because I felt the same way when I got here. There were some realities that I had to deal with, and that one of them, of course, was methadone. Well, coming out of an environment that was anti-methadone, both Synanon and pretty much Phoenix wasn't necessarily, New York wasn't necessary, but I began to learn about Nicewander and Dole when I got to New York, and things began to change in a different way. But Bedford-Stuyvesant was the beginning of my change, and seeing that the numbers of addicts and the condition of that community as a result of drugs, that I don't know anything else that could have changed it but methadone. I wasn't ready to admit that during that period. But I think the reality and looking back, that's something I came to understand and have to deal with later on as I begin to move forward. Now, I still am a TC man, But what I came to deal with, and I think that Dr. DuPont had a lot to do with this, he may not know it, is that terms with that, there are different things that have to be done when we find ourselves in a critical situation like that. And this was as a nation that we were facing. This was very serious stuff in terms of people dying, young men dying, young men going to prison for the rest of their lives, and all over chasing around a little white powder that they either stuck in their arm and stuck up their nose that they thought was going to make a difference in their lives. So there was a lot of confusion, and people were dying as a result of that. So something had to be done. So, of course, it became clear to me that we were not the only game in town. It took me a long time to admit that, but nevertheless, came to terms with that. So I had to come up with, then what place did methadone have? My rationale became that methadone had a great place in terms of detox. No place else. But detox was a perfect place for methadone because basically a person could go on, get on methadone, get detox, and then they could go into a TC. Where the real treatment would take place. But more and more as things progressed and knowledge broadened, my knowledge broadened, and I began to learn more about the field of addiction, methadone certainly had its place. I did some of the fights that Dr. DuPont and I had were always an educational experience. And I remember on radio, on television, we were kind of all over the place. And in one way, I guess the opposite position that RAP had taken helped NTA also in terms of its learning experience and having to look at some things, because we made sure that you looked at some things. And I think the element of the community at that time, let's remember, this was sort of in the middle of the civil rights period, so you had organizations such as the Black Panther Party, you had a lot of militant organizations, and a lot of the positions that were being taken at that time was that methadone was this thing that was being forced on the African American community, and there was some kind of conspiracy to take out the African American community, and that this group of people that were being supplied or supported by the government weren't really interested in the community. And this was very powerful, that was being said in a very powerful way by powerful groups of people. Black Man's Development was kind of the turning point when they began to involve themselves in methadone treatment. And I think they tried to do it in a different way. Now, Black Man's Development was an interesting organization in itself because they were militant in a sense, but they had embraced, by going into methadone, the establishment. So they got criticism from both sides. People were scratching their heads, well, who are they? What are they about? But I think that more and more people had to look at, and I guess it was also seeing people who had been terribly addicted and seeing them back in the community, and they seem to be doing very well. Unless you're crazy, you have to look at those sort of things. So we began to look at those sort of things, and I think over the years that our relationship certainly, and it was too bad that Dr. DuPont, by the time we got to this point, was gone. So this is the first time probably he's ever heard me say this or speak like this, that there was a change, and there has been a change in my personal attitude, and of course the attitude of the organization. And of course, a lot of that had to do with our longevity. We're not completely crazy, So, and you don't stay around 40 years unless you do know a few things. And so, we work very closely with the present administration, Ms. Hernandez, who is here today. And worked with continuously with the different organizations that come from the district, and will continue to do that. So just thank you for the opportunity to say that today.
Thank you very much. I had not heard that story of your background, and it's very interesting to me. I was born in Toledo, Ohio, and lived my early years there. And a neighbor and very close friend of my mother's was a fellow named Chuck Diedrich. Do you know that name? Very well. Chuck Diedrich, I've got a picture of him at my parents' wedding. He founded Synanon, which is kind of an amazing connection to put together.